All right, listeners, ready for another deep dive? This time you've given us pretty interesting read an article called Hashtag One Oral Pleasure Secret that gives her explosive orgasms the start-stop method. So
Yeah,
no judgment here, right? We're all about exploring, the world of pleasure.
of course.
And this article seems to promise some pretty explosive results.
It does seem to promise a lot.
So let's dive in and see what it's all about.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this article is that it's not just like a technique or a tip.
Right.
It really taps into a much broader kind of concept of pleasure.
Okay.
And it talks about this idea of delayed gratification, which we see everywhere, right? Like marketing, fitness, all these different fields.
Yeah.
So building that anticipation to make the reward that much sweeter.
Okay, I get that. I mean, that makes sense, like in a lot of areas of life, but I have to admit, applying that to, this area,
Right.
I'm intrigued. How does that actually work in practice?
Yeah, so the article lays out a method, and they call it, as you mentioned, start-stop.
Okay.
And it's all about creating this cycle of arousal, and then, as counterintuitive as it might sound,
Right.
a deliberate pause.
So almost like a slow burn, kind of
Yeah.
building the tension. I can see how the anticipation would come in, but I imagine this takes a lot of control,
Yes.
not to mention being really attuned to your partner.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. This is not just some kind of mechanical process, right? It's not just steps 1, 2, 3.
Right.
It really requires emotional intelligence,
Hmm.
which the article actually really emphasizes quite a bit.
Interesting. So it's not just about the physical steps.
Yeah.
It's also about reading your partner's cues and kind of adjusting accordingly. It's making it sound a lot more nuanced than just like a how-to guide.
Precisely. And I think a good analogy for this is like learning to play a musical instrument, right?
Okay.
You need to master the technique, obviously.
Yeah.
But the real artistry comes from adding feeling and pauses and these subtle shifts that make it truly captivating.
Oh, I love that analogy. So in this case, the music is all about understanding your partner's responses, knowing when to build, when to ease off, when to, create that perfect flow.
Exactly. And the article actually goes into some specifics about what that looks like
Okay.
in practice, for instance. It suggests starting slowly, focusing on the less sensitive areas first.
Got it. So setting the stage,
Yeah.
creating that anticipation right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do you know when to shift gears?
Yeah, this is where that emotional intelligence really comes into play.
Right.
The article talks a lot about nonverbal communication.
Okay.
It's those subtle cues like changes in breathing, muscle tension, even the way she's holding on to you.
Interesting.
Being able to read those signals is key to knowing when to increase the intensity or when to maybe pull back a bit.
So it's like almost like a dance
Yeah.
where you're both leading and following, responding to each other's movements. There's like a real beauty in that, I think.
There is, and the article argues that this type of attunement, right,
Yeah.
this deep understanding of your partner's responses,
Yeah.
it not only enhances the physical pleasure,
Okay.
but it also strengthens the emotional connection.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
So it's not just about reaching the destination, it's about enjoying the journey together.
exactly. And this is where the start-stop technique really comes into focus.
Okay.
Because as your partner is approaching that peak of arousal, that's when you intentionally slow down or even pause the stimulation completely.
Wait, really? That seems so counterintuitive. I feel like that would be frustrating.
It might seem that way, but the article suggests that this interruption actually serves to intensify the pleasure when you resume.
Okay.
It's like hitting the reset button on pleasure,
Interesting.
allowing that anticipation to build even higher.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So you bring her close back off and then repeat that cycle.
So
the
that's-
2-time kind of amplifying the sensation. But how do you know you're doing it right? How do you know,
Again, it comes back to those nonverbal cues.
okay.
Is her breathing getting faster? Is she arching her back? Is she pulling you closer?
Okay.
These are all signs that she's enjoying the buildup and that she's ready for you to continue.
It sounds like it takes practice
Yeah.
and a lot of communication to really master this.
It does.
It's definitely not something you just pick up overnight.
You're absolutely right. And that's why the article emphasizes that this isn't just about following a set of instructions.
Right.
It's about being present, being responsive, and creating a truly satisfying experience for both people.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the emotional intelligence aspect, but this article also gets into some pretty specific techniques. What else stood out to you?
Well, one thing that struck me was this metaphor that the article uses, of savoring a delicious meal.
Okay.
Like you wouldn't just devour everything in one bite, right?
Right.
You would take your time to appreciate each flavor, each nuance.
Yeah.
And it's about applying that same kind of mindfulness to intimacy.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So even though we're talking about, physical sensations,
Yeah.
it's really about being present, appreciating each moment.
Exactly. And that ties into this idea of consistency that the article emphasizes. Like once you find something that your partner is responding to,
Yeah.
you don't need to constantly switch things up, right?
Right.
Like build on that rhythm, that connection.
Yeah.
Let the intensity kind of grow organically.
So it's not about like trying to throw in every trick in the book.
Right.
It's more about tuning into what's working and
Yeah.
letting that be your guide.
Precisely. And the article suggests that this can actually make the experience more powerful for both of you.
Okay.
It allows her to really like sink into the sensations to build towards a more fulfilling climax.
Now, we've been focusing a lot on the clitoris,
Right.
but the article also mentions using your hands for added stimulation.
Yes. So is that part of this whole like building the experience idea as well?
Absolutely. It suggests things like gently caressing her thighs, her
Yeah.
hips,
Okay.
maybe even light touches around the vulva while you're using your mouth.
Yeah.
But again, it all circles back to that emotional intelligence.
Right.
Being aware of her reactions and adjusting accordingly.
So it's like you're creating this symphony of sensations almost.
Yes.
Using your hands and your mouth to kind of build this layered, complex experience.
That's a great way to put it. And the article also encourages subtle variations to keep things interesting.
Okay.
Not major changes,
Yeah.
but little shifts in pressure rhythm, maybe the direction of your movements.
Okay.
Just enough to add a little spark without disrupting the flow.
It's like adding a little improvisation to the music.
Exactly.
Those unexpected moments that keep things exciting.
It's about finding that balance between consistency and novelty, right? Creating a unique experience that's tailored to your partner's responses in that moment. No, there's one more thing I want to touch on that the article brought up, and that's aftercare.
Yes.
Why is that so crucial, especially in the context of all these techniques we've been talking about?
Aftercare is so important because it's a way to nurture that emotional connection that you've built during the intimate experience.
Yeah.
It's about showing your partner that you care about her pleasure and her well-being,
Right.
not just the physical act itself.
So it's not just a case of like rolling over and going to sleep.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The article suggests taking the time to hold her close, whisper sweet nothings, just generally make her feel loved and appreciated.
Okay.
It's about extending that intimacy beyond the purely physical realm.
I can see how that would really solidify that feeling of connection, make the whole experience feel more meaningful.
Exactly. It reinforces that sense of trust and vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's so essential to a truly fulfilling intimate relationship.
It seems like this article, really goes beyond just a set of techniques.
Yeah.
It's about fostering a deeper level of connection and intimacy with your partner.
I agree. And while this particular article focused on oral sex, the underlying principles of communication, emotional intelligence, and aftercare are really applicable to any form of intimacy.
That's a great point. So whether you're exploring this specific method or not,
Right.
those elements are crucial for creating, a satisfying and fulfilling experience for both partners.
Absolutely. And speaking of exploration, the article briefly touches on this idea of teasing
Oh, yeah.
as a way to heighten anticipation.
Okay.
Have you ever thought about how powerful a little playful anticipation can be?
Oh, definitely. Like that feeling you get when you're waiting for a roller coaster to drop.
Yeah.
And your heart's racing.
Exactly.
And
And the article gives some examples of how to incorporate teasing into intimacy.
Yeah.
Things like hovering your mouth just above the clitoris, using feather-light touches, or maybe whispering something suggestive in her ear.
It's about creating that delicious tension between giving and withholding pleasure, building the excitement to a fever pitch.
Precisely. And when done well, teasing can make the eventual release even more explosive.
So it's all about enjoying the journey as much as the destination, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful way to think about intimacy in general.
Yeah.
It's not just about the end goal. It's about savoring each moment, each sensation, and building a deeper connection with your partner along the way.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From, the specifics of the start-stop method to the broader themes of communication, emotional intelligence, and the importance of aftercare.
We've explored a lot of fascinating ideas
We have.
about how to enhance pleasure and create truly fulfilling, intimate experiences.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious to know what resonated most with you, dear listener.
Yeah, what sparked your interest?
What insights will you take away from this deep dive?
What will you experiment with?
And perhaps most importantly, how will you use this knowledge to deepen your connection with your partner and create even more incredible experiences together?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something specific you'd like to explore further in our next deep dive.
It's interesting how a technique that seems so focused on like the physical pleasure also brings up the emotional connection.
Yeah.
It's like they really go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And this article really drives that point home.
Yeah.
It talks about the importance of eye contact and sharing your own feelings, really being present in the moment with your partner.
It's about making it a shared experience, not just like focused on the physical sensations.
Exactly. And that shared experience, you know, that feeling of intimacy and vulnerability can be incredibly powerful for both partners.
You know, something else that caught my eye was the article's suggestion to kind of reflect on each experience.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about what you both enjoyed, what you might want to try differently next time.
That's such a valuable point.
Yeah.
It's about continuous growth, right? Both individually and as a couple.
Yeah.
That open communication, that willingness to explore and learn together can be incredibly bonding.
It creates this like feedback loop that helps you both become, you know, better lovers and deepen your connection.
Precisely. It reinforces the idea that intimacy is a journey, not just a destination. It's about constantly learning, growing, and discovering new ways to pleasure each other.
And that journey, that shared exploration, can be just as fulfilling as the destination itself.
Perhaps even more so.
Yeah.
Because it's in that shared journey that you build trust and intimacy and a deeper understanding of each other's needs and desires.
Yeah. So, you know, while this article provided some very specific techniques, it seems like the real takeaway is much broader.
Yeah.
It's about approaching intimacy with mindfulness, intention, and a genuine desire to connect with your partner on a deeper level.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
It's not just about the act itself. It's about the love and care and respect that you bring to the experience.
And ultimately, those are the qualities that create truly unforgettable intimate moments.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay, but before we do, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Right.
Something that wasn't explicitly stated in the article, but really resonated with us as we were discussing this.
It's this idea that pleasure in its truest form is about so much more than just physical sensations. It's about connection and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And the joy of sharing something special with someone you care about.
And that connection, that shared experience can be a source of, you know, profound joy and intimacy and even healing.
Absolutely.
So as you go forth and explore the techniques and ideas we've discussed today, remember to approach them with an open heart, a curious mind, and a deep respect for your partner.
And most importantly, remember to have fun.
Yes, always.
Until next time, happy exploring.